Hello everyone, welcome back again. My name is Jesse, and in this wonderful tutorial, we're trying to see how to work with a very nice package called DataTable. So DataTable is an alternative to Pandas, which is a part of a package in R called DataTable, which is very simple and then very nice, and it's very useful when you're trying to work with data clean and then data analysis, just like Pandas. So the main purpose and the main benefit of DataTable is that it emphasizes on speed and then it's for big data support, right? Pandas can be used for that, but DataTable can also be used for that. Now let's see how to work with DataTable. So first of all, just go with pip install DataTable to install it, and now you start working with it. Okay, so first of all, I'm just going to come back to my cell. Then let's load a package, EDA package, which is very simple. It's going to be import DataTable data, right? Table as DT, right? By convention, that is the name that we use as DT. Then you'll be seeing the various methods and functions of DT, right? So the various methods and then functions are, if I go with my dir DT, we have data table, right? We have frame. So most of them works with frame, right? Just like in Pandas, which is data frame, but data table, it is called frame, right? That is the most important class that you'll be using. So let's see some basic stuff you can do with it. So these are the main ones. You can check all of these stuff. Can read, do fread, which is a very powerful function. We can do join, you can do logs, you can do a lot of stuff. So let's see some of them in this tutorial. So first of all, let's see how to read a file. So we're trying to read a simple file. So I'll just come back to this place and let's see how to read a simple CSV file, right? So data frame gives you one function to enable you to read CSV file, to read TXT file, to read Excel file, and several other file formats. So let's see that example. It's going to be my df, and I'll just go with dt.fread, right? So with the fread, I can read any file, whether it is CSV, whether it is TXT, to automatically detect the file format and then delimiter and then read it for us. So let's go back to our site here. Inside our data set, we have our data set here, and you have several examples here. So I'll be choosing this particular one. So it's going to be my dataset 01, right, slash my example underscore data dot csv, right? So if I read it, it's automatically going to identify the particular file and then read it for us in a very simple way. So that is something very simple. If I go with df.head, if I go with head, you'll be able to see it perfectly well, just like Pandas, right? So that is something very interesting about data tables, right? Very interesting. So with the fread, you can read a CSV file. So let's try and see how to read a different file format. So we're trying to read different file formats. So different file formats. So we try and see how to read a simple Excel file. So PD, let's call it df underscore Excel. Then I just go with dt for data table dot fread. Then I'll go in the same directory that I have, datasets 01 slash my example. So we'll be choosing a simple Excel file. So we have an Excel file here, right? So we're trying to see how to read this particular Excel file. So just go with example underscore data dot slsx, right? So if I read it, it's going to automatically identify the particular file type and read it for us, right? Perfect, without any issue. So with the fread, you can read Excel files, you can read CSV files. So I can just go back to this df.sl.head, and I'll be able to see it perfectly working, right? Perfect. Right, that is something very interesting, something very nice about data table. Very simple. Now let's see how to read a different file format, which is not Excel. So I'll try and read a different file format, which is a TXT file. So I'll just come back to this same place and then let's call this one as reading a TXT file, right? Or a test file. So in case I want to read a test file, I can also use the same option. So let's go with TXT. Then I'll come back to my directory. Inside my directory, I have a TXT file here. So in case I want to read this particular TXT file, I'll just change the extension TXT, then automatically to detect that particular file. Right, perfect. So that detected perfectly raw, and then I can read it with the head. So that's working perfectly well. So that is something very interesting about data table. With data table, you can read any file format without specifying that particular file, right? Extension, just with the fread. Now let's see some other stuff you can also do. So in case I want to check for the shape of the data set, it's going to be my df, right? We are using the CSV one, this particular one, df dot shape, is also going to work perfectly for us, right? So this is the shape. So just like Pandas, most of the features of Pandas can be found here, but Pandas is of course more developed than this with a lot of features. So df.shape, you can get the shape. In case I want to get the row, I want to get the rows, I just go with my df.shape. This is the first method. Then this, since this is like a tuple, I just go with 0, then I get the row, right? That is one way. I can also go with df.nRow, n rows, then it's going to give us perfectly for us, right? So that is another way of getting the rows. This is going to be the next method, right? And in case I want to get the columns, I can also do the same thing. This columns, it's going to be my df.shape. That is the columns, which is going to be 1, right? 14 columns. And then in case I want to also do the same thing, it's going to be df.n_calls, right? Perfect, right? So that is how to work with data frame. So in case you want to check for all the various features you can do with this, so let's call this all the various methods of our data frame or of our frame, right? Just going to go in df, let's make it dir, then I'll pass in my df. So if I pass in my df, you can see all the various things you can do. So these are some of the things you can just check for: the head, the key, the types, the L types. You can check for the maximum, minimum, mode, n rows, unique, several other features. Very, very interesting, right? Several. You can even do the tail, right? So in case I want to check for the tail, I can just go with df.tail, just like in Pandas, and it's also going to work perfectly for us. And you can also pass in a value. So let's pass in a value for the head. So to preview it, let's say the first 10 rows, df.head, and let's say the first, make it 5. It's also going to work perfectly for us, right? Just like Pandas. So very, very interesting. Now let's see some other stuff you can also do apart from the basic stuff. In case I want to check for the columns, right? Not the length of the column, but the names of my column. I just go with df. We don't do dot column, we just go with dot names, right? That is the difference. If you do dot columns, it's not going to work, right? So that is how to get all the column names. That is column names. Very interesting. And then in case you also want to get the data types, which is going to be, so it's going to be for our data types, right? In case I want to get the data types, it's going to be df dot, not dt, right? This is going to be s types. That is for data types for this. Not unlike Pandas. In Pandas it would have been something like this, df.d types, right? But in DataTable it's going to be df.s types, right? That is how to get it. It's going to give us all the various data types for each and every of the columns. Very interesting. In case you also want to check for the dimensions, you can also do that with this option. So in case I want to check for the dimensions, so my dimension is going to be my df.n_dims, right? So it's going to give us 2 dimensions. That is the basic idea behind the basic overview of some of the things you can do with data tables. Perfect. So that is some basic stuff you can do. Now let's see some simple stuff. In case I want to also check for, let's say, I want to check for the number of missing values, right? Missing values. I can just go with my df.count any function, right? So this is similar to doing something like in Pandas, like this option, like df.isNa, right? Something like that. So that is the basic idea behind data tables, right? To get for the number of missing values, and then from our data set we don't have any missing values. Very, very interesting. You can also do, just as we did S type here, right? You can also do L type, which is also the same thing, to check for data types. So in that case, going to be my df.l types, right? That's another thing you can also do. You can also do that one, or that option also, which is almost the same as this one, right? Very, very interesting. So these are some of the basic stuff you can do with data tables. Now let's see some other aspects, some other stuff you can also do. So in case you also want to view the entire stuff, you can just go with preview, right? In case I want to preview it, I can just go with df.view. There, with this I can view the entire stuff, to preview the entire data set. Very interesting with this option, right? df.view. Perfect. So let's see how to select our files, right? So how do we select columns and then rows? In case you want to select columns and rows, how do you do that? So first of all, the basic syntax for selecting, and then in data table, you just go with my data table, right? Then I just go with my I, which is going to be my row, and then J. Then I'll supply whatever I want to do. So in a nutshell, it's going to be like dt. Then it's going to be my row, right? My row, whatever I want to select. So that is going to be my row selector. And then the next one is going to be my column selector. Then I just put in whatever I want to put in there, right? whatever function, whatever stuff I want to do. So that's the basic syntax for selecting columns and then rows in DataTable. So let's see how to work with this. So I'm just going to make it like this so that you can see it very well, right? So you can just keep this one as reference. Okay, so let's try it. So first of all, let's see how to select columns, right, by index. So in case I want to select a column by index, we can just do that in the simpler format of, let's say, df. Then I want to get the first column. It's going to be this one. So if I go with one, it's going to select the first column for us, right? So let's preview it so that you see what I mean. So if I go with this df.head, let's go with 3, right? So in case I want to get column 1, right, I just go with df1, right, to get the first column by index, right, the 1. Perfect. That is one way of doing this. So this is similar to doing something in Pandas like this. So let me bring it in Pandas format here. So this is going to be for Pandas. It's going to be df.ilog, right? In case we're doing it in Pandas, then backslash, then 1, right? So that is index locator, right? So that integer locator. So that is in case we're doing it in Pandas, right? You'll be using this particular option, right? But in DataTable, we just go with this particular option. We don't have ilog and log function. The simplest format is this. That is the only function we have, this particular format, right, to do our selection. Very interesting. So let's see how to select. We have seen how to select by index. Now let's see how to select by name. So in case I want to select a column by the name, right? So we realized that we had something like this to get all the column names. We had all these column names. So in case I want to select email, I can just come back to the same place and then select it by this option by going with this. And I'll pass in the name here, so email, right? So I'll pass in the name just like in Pandas. So this is going to select the entire stuff for us, right? So very, very simple. So in case I wanted to do this one in Pandas, it would have been like this, df, then I'll pass in the same thing, right? Because Pandas would have been the same thing. So in case I wanted to do it with Pandas, it would have been this. But this is for DataTable. Very interesting. So how do I also select not just by index and by name, but in case I also want to select a group of rows, or say, let's say select multiple columns, right? So in case I want to select multiple columns at a go, right? So we so that we have these various columns, this one column, but in case I want to select multiple column, how do I do that? So I can just go with this option. Let's go with df, right? Then I'll just bring this particular option here. So with this, before we move on to selecting multiple columns, let's try out something first before we move on to multiple columns. So in Pandas, you can do something like this, .ilog, right? Then you just pass in this particular value, right, just as we did above. Then you pass in your particular index here, right? But in DataTable, you can also do something similar by going in this option. Then you bring the column, then you pass in your value here, right? So this is similar to the same thing above here, in case you are working in Pandas. So let's try that one. So if I come back here, it's going to give us the same result as we had, right? So this option is similar to this option in Pandas, right? Very simple. Now since we have gotten how to do this, we can also use the same option to select multiple columns, right? So this was for column 1 called full name. So in case I want to select multiple column, I can also come back to the same option, then supply that particular multiple column I want to select, right? So I can just pass in either the index or let's pass in the name. So I can pass in a single name, like let's say email, right? So this is going to be a single column, right? So in case I want to pass in multiple columns, I also go back to the option. Let's say I want to get full name, right? So in this case, I have to put them together in a bracket. So in that case, it's going to be something like this, just like in Pandas. Then I'll come back to this option. Then it's going to select email and then full name for us in a very simple format. So this option is just like doing something like this in Pandas, df.log, right? Then you go with the column. Then you pass in the particular column that you want to get, which is going to be my into brackets, let's say email, and then the next one is going to be my full name, right? This is similar to this, right, in DataTable. So very simple, very interesting. So you have seen how to select columns by index, by name, by index, and then just in the format of an ilog, then for multiple columns like that, right? So now let's see how to work with selecting rows, right? So it's going to be for selecting of rows. So this is something like the df.ilog, let's say 01, right? In Pandas, you do something like that. But how do you do the same thing in DataTable? So it's going to be in this option. So as the rule goes was dt, right? Then we have our row, then our column, right? Then you just pass in whatever you want to do. that was the row. So let's see how to use the same thing. So the row first, so let's go with df, then the row. So if I want the row 0, I just go with 0, right? If I go with this, it's going to select the column, right? This is going to select a column ID, but I don't want column ID, I want row 1. So how do I do that? So I just go back with the option of this, then I'll pass in this option, right? Just like in Pandas. So if I go with this, it's going to select only row 1 for us, right? This is similar to doing this in Pandas. Very, very interesting, very simple. So just pick the row, then every column, right? Every column. So row 1, row 0, and then every column. So I can also use it to specify to row 0, and then maybe column 1 and column 2 or column 3. So let's try that one. So it's going to be like this. So df, then I'll pass in my row 0. Then in case I want to select, let's say email and then the rest, I can just go with that option. So it's going to be this option of, let's say, email, right? Then I'll just pass in the next one. Let's call it as, let's say, gender, right? So if I go with this option, it's going to pick for row 1 and then these ones, right? But I have to put them into this particular option. So let's bring it here. Perfect. So that has selected only row 1, right? And email and gender for us, right? That is how to do this thing. Same thing. This is similar to doing something like this in Pandas. So let's bring the Pandas one above. There's going to be Pandas. In Pandas, option is going to be like this. Let's go back here. df.log, right? You can just use ilog or log, but let's go with log. Then I'll pass in the particular stuff I want to get. So in case I want to get, let's say 1 0, right? Then I'll pass in the other one, like let's say full name and then the rest. So let's say email. Then I can also do this other one for, let's say, gender. Right? In case I was working in Pandas, it's going to be this option. Or another option can be this. So df dot my particular location that I want, particular row I want. So let's say 0. Then I'll pass in the rest, which is going to be, let's say, email, right? To get that particular email. So that is how to work with data tables using these very simple options. So there are several stuff you can do with it. So you have seen how to select rows using this option, right? In case I want to select rows and then limit them to specific columns, I can just go with this one. In case I also want to select not just rows, but I want to be selective. Let's say I want to pick some selected rows and then some selected columns. Just going to go with df. Then I'll just pass in 0. Let's say 0 to 1, right? So 0 to 3, right? Then I'll pass in stuff. If I go with this, it's going to select everything. So row 1, row 0 to row 3, only row 0 to 3, and every column. So I can also do the same thing and restrict them by this option. So this option gives us this. So I can just come back to this place and pass in the column that I want. So I want column, let's say email, and then I want another column like, let's say, gender, right? If I go with this, it's going to select only those ones for us. That's how to select multiple columns, multiple rows. So this is for selecting multiple rows. So selecting multiple rows and then all columns. So this is something similar to Pandas option of this. Of, let's say, ilog. Can use ilog for that. Then I'll specify the column which is going to be 0 and then 2, 3. Right. Then I'll pass in the various stuff I want. Right. So that is something very simple with the ilog. So I can use this one to get everything. Right. So very simple in Pandas. Very interesting. Now let's see some simple stuff. So you have seen a lot. There are a lot of things you can do, but this is just an overview of the various things you can do with data tables. So let's see some very simple stuff. In case I want to select selectively, right, using this particular option, just as we could do a slice, a range here, I can also specify the particular stuff. So it can be in this option. So let's copy this here. This is going to be selecting selectively, selective selection, right? So in case I want to get some rows and leave the rest, so you say I want to get row 3, row 0, row 3, row, let's say 5, row 10, right? I can use this particular option. So this one must be inside this option here. It's going to pick only that row. That's going to pick these ones perfectly for us. So they are selected row 0, 3, 5, 10 perfectly, and then giving us the agenda. That is how to do some selective selection using data table. Now there are some basic stuff. You can also do some various interesting stuff you can do with a very simple feature of data table called the F expression, or right, let's call it as the F expression or F operator. Right, so with this F operator, you can do a lot of things. So let's try and see how to work with that. So the F expression can be done in this particular format. The simplest format, just go with my df. Anytime I do something like this, I can just use the f expression to select, let's say, email, right? If I go with email, it's going to list that particular expression for us. So it's supposed to be this option, not this particular option. So dt, not dt, right? So this dt is coming from the data frame. So it's going to pick this particular stuff format. There's some simple understanding about the f expressions, which is usually going to pick the data load within that particular instance, right? That is why it was able to pick email as 0. But that is something interesting about the expression. It's going to give us the type of expression. Now let's see some useful stuff you can do with the f expression. You can just import it from DataTable, import f, right? So that is it. So with this f, you can do a lot of things. So let's try out and see what the f has to offer us. So these are the basic stuff you can do with the f, right? These are normal stuff that comes with the f expression. So let's try and see how to select a column using the f expression. So select a column using the f expression. So that's going to be my df, just as we did something like this, right? To get the email, right? We did this one to get all the email. You can also use the f expression to help us with that by going with this option df. Then you bring the f function there to help us with that. So it's going to be this option. Then I just go with my f.email. If I go with f.email to automatically identify that this email is referring to this email above, right? So if I run it, it's still going to work and give us the same result, right? So the f expression can be used instead of bringing them to brackets. Can just use the f to call for the column, right? To attach to the column. So it automatically identify that particular column from the current data frame. So this is something like the dot notation, right? So this is something like the dot notation, right? So dot notation. But in case I want to just do the normal bracket notation, so like as we did above, which is df, then let's call it as a full name, right? I can also use the same option here by going with this option df. Then I'll pass in the same thing I did, but instead of going with the f dot full name, right? In case because of the space, I'll not be able to get it to work. I cannot do f dot full name. It's not going to work, right? So I can just come back to the same place and put it inside the bracket of this full name. And it's also going to work perfectly as above, right? So that is one of the two main ways you can use the f expression, using this particular option, the dot notation option, or the bracket notation option. With the f notation, you can also do some group by and then some other aspect. So let's try a simple example. So this is going to be a simple group by using the f expression, right? So let's try that one. So if I go with my dir and then my dt, you can see that it has some basic functions you can do. We can do something like join, we can do mean, we can do sum, right? We can do some union, can do some various basic stuff. So let's try and see how to use these ones alongside the f expression to group something. So it's going to be my df for my data frame. Then I'll select a particular column I want. So I want all the columns. Then I'll just go with my dt.sum. Then I'll use the f expression to help us with that. So since our data set doesn't have, let's check our data set. Let's see. So let's go with df.view. So if I check it, we don't have any. We cannot sum these ones up because of this particular value. So let's try and see how to let's say this is an example, right? This number. So let's try and sum these numbers up. So can be let's use the f expression here to help us with that. It's going to be f.id, right? So automatically identify that it's picking this particular id column, right? So we're going to sum up this id column, and I can group them by an id. So let's go with like by. So it's going to be dt.by, right? Then I'll pass in the particular country I want to go. So f.country. So we had our countries column here. Realize we had something like country here. So in case I want to group by countries and then sum it up, I can use this particular option. So dt.sum f.id, right? We are summing the IDs, right? Because that is the only numbers we have not yet cleaned. Then we are grouping them by the country. So if I run this one, it's going to automatically work for us and give us our result. So let's come back here and let's run it. So if I run it here, hopefully it doesn't give us any error. So that just added them perfectly for us. So we can understand is having this particular ID, Albania, all of these things. So that is how to work with the f string along f expression, not f string, f expression or f operator alongside a group by. Very simple, very interesting. So there are several stuff you can also do with DataTable. So let's see how to export our files, right? So in case I want to export our files to the various formats. After I've finished doing my analysis, I want to export them. So it's going to be export our data, export data frame or frame, right? So there are several ways. You can just go with a simple format. So we have my df.to CSV. It's also going to work just like in Pandas. So I can just go here and call it as, let's say, new example today data set .1.csv, and it's also going to export it perfectly for it. So if I come back here, you can see that we have it here, right? New example data, right? Perfect. So you can use it to export a frame to CSV. You can also use it to export it to other formats, not just CSV, but other formats like J. J is a simple format that comes with data frame, right? So you can just go with DataTable rather. So to J, then I'll just do the same thing. So let's call this one as new example 01, right? .j, right? And then it's going to export it to J for us. So I can also open with J's in a simple format. And there's some various things you can do with DataTable. So you can do a lot of things. If I go back my dir and I go my df, we could see that we had some other stuff here. We could export here. So you can export to NumPy, you can export to can export to Pandas, right? Even to Pandas, and then do your analysis. You can export to tuples, you can export to dictionary, you can export to CSV, you can export to J. Very, very simple, very nice. So to open a J file, just like we had our J file here, we see that we have a J file. Where is it? Can't find the J file, right? But in case you want to read a J file, it's very simple. Just come back to the same option that we did, then just go with the f read. You can just use it. So df.j, it's going to be dt.fread to enable us to read that particular file. So let's call it example.j, right? And it's also going to identify that particular file format and then read it for us in a simple way. That's the basic idea and basic overview about DataTable. So DataTables has a lot of things to offer us. So these are some of the things that we can do with it. Very, very interesting and very nice. So the basic idea is just import DataTable as DT. Then you can just use fread to read any file format, CSV, Excel file, TST file. Then you can do the basic stuff like getting the head, getting the shape, getting the number of rows, the number of columns. Then you can even check for the missing value. You can get the tail. You can do some various other interesting stuff. So thank you for watching this tutorial. In case you have any question or contribution, you can just put inside the comment section below, and then check the link below for some interesting materials, some interesting courses to enable you master machine learning, data cleaning, and then Python. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next session. Stay blessed. Bye.